It was an early morning. Josh had rented a track hoe, turned on the lights on this early morning, and said, I need to start digging a hole for the concrete house. This video is going to be how the concrete house came into being and the steps that Josh has already gone through. You may have watched us install a concrete column on the back porch, but we had to get there somehow, and we wanted to show you some of the historical photos to get the concrete house where it is today, and we'll continue to add on to in future videos. So Josh, on his track hoe, once the sun has come up, starting to dig a pretty substantial hole into the hillside. He had an exact place picked out that he wanted to dig the hole and put the house, and he's got young Josh there hanging on the side who will also be digging part of this hole. A better view looking up towards the road, and you can see the hole is being dug, and a lot of this red dirt is going to get pushed down to lengthen and widen his driveway. We got younger Josh on the track hoe here and just making that hole bigger. This takes some time in several days. Looking comfortable on that track hoe, doesn't he? As I mentioned, all of this dirt has to be pushed. Now, this is young Josh finding zero, and they're using a laser for this on virgin soil, and that's ultimately where the slab will lay. So they want to make sure that they're at zero everywhere to create a nice flat surface. But you can see Josh on the left pushing a lot of that dirt down the hill to help extend his driveway and his where he parks his cars. Looks a lot of fun to be in a track hoe, doesn't it? Now there was a tree in the way, almost where the track hoe's sitting right now. So with the thumb on the track hoe, he just yanked that tree out and got it out of the way. And you can see where they've already pushed the driveway, and it's already wider with some gravel. You can see the bales of hail in this particular snapshot just to prevent erosion as time goes by. They installed quite a bit of plumbing that's the kitchen there, and then they have plumbing on the right hand side that you can't see, and they use the compactor to get the soil back to a flat state. Now these round holes, this will actually be tied into the slab, and these are called shear pins. There's several of these around the perimeter, pretty much anywhere there's going to be a column that ties into the second floor. And we've got some of the lumber here that we're going to use, Josh is going to use for forms for the concrete itself. And there's actually two levels of the slab. We got young Josh cutting some rebar in the driveway to get ready for the concrete pour, and Josh himself creating some of the steel cages that he's going to use on the perimeter of the house. These are known as grade beams, and he uses them on the perimeter and also a little bit later on the patio. Here Josh is using the Rebar Bender 2000 to create some step-down rebar. And you can see he's tying in that step-down rebar here in this shot where you see it slant away and go down. And that's where we go from one grade to another. Some of the wood forming that he's got in place before he pours concrete as he continues to tie in his rebar. Much better view of the two different sections of slab at two different heights. You can see the additional plumbing in the background and the pecs coming out. Lots and lots of rebar tied into this slab. It's not going anywhere, and with those shear pins, it keeps the slab from actually sliding down the hill. And there's about a dozen of those shear pins, I think, around the perimeter. And some of it's maybe you consider overkill, those of you that work in the concrete, but Josh has done so much concrete work, both commercial and residential, that he incorporated some commercial techniques as well as residential in this slab. And of course, the day that he orders the concrete, the cement to be delivered, it rains. But Josh says, rain or shine, we're going to pour concrete, pour that cement. And so they pour the grade beams first, those cages that we saw a little while ago. And as we start to fill up the slab or the forms, it will move into the big wide open space. And we got an audience member there on the left, keeping an eye on the concrete being poured. Here's Josh using hand signals with the truck as he fills up a wheelbarrow to get some concrete in one of the farther corners that the truck couldn't reach with his boom. Now this is after the concrete's been poured. You can see we have two levels of concrete, and he's going to add on to the closest level with a patio. Look at all of those concrete blocks up on the scaffolding as he builds the retaining wall higher. And you can see he's going to have columns within the retaining walls as well. Using some of the thick glass in the retaining walls to bring in some natural light. He has these strategically placed to get some sunlight. And we can see some of the scaffolding here as he works on the retaining wall. And these horizontal boards, or these diagonal boards that you see here, are called story poles. And that's to help Josh attach string lines to make sure that this wall is straight and level. Of course, he's got his level there as well. And you can see he's going to build columns into the walls. These columns are going to be load bearing for the second story. And using the snap tie forms, he can actually pour concrete into those voids to create those columns and rebar within those voids as well to strengthen those columns. You can see the stub sticking out of the top now that we have the forms removed, and that will be used later for the second story and beams for the second story. Better shot, and you can see some of that thick glass on the left-hand side. You can also see the stub sticking out of the column in the background there, plus some additional block that'll be used for the retaining wall. Pretty cool shot of Josh standing on his wall in the fall in Kentucky. But then he got to work on the retaining wall. Now this concrete that he has poured in this ditch has a grade beam in it as well, probably overkill, but he just felt better if he did that. You can see he also has some rebar stubs sticking out of this as well. So think of that steel cage in that concrete, but he needs a flat surface for his blocks. Additional rebar will eventually stick out of the top of this retaining wall so they can build concrete columns for the patio as well. Going to work on laying those columns, and see how he's staggering those. So you don't want your blocks to be in the same orientation. You stagger them to make them stronger. And he's got rebar sticking up out of some of those blocks, as well as rebar for the columns that will be in there later on. Got our audience member and another audience member. We got a cat, not sure where that one showed up, but you can see more of the blocks being put in place. All of this done by hand, folks. No concrete truck or cement truck was used for this work. You can see the stair stepping there to make the wall stronger. And again, some of the blocks will have rebar within them as well. But on the ends and in strategic locations, he'll have rebar sticking up out of the retaining wall. You can see those gaps in the wall, and that's where the retaining wall columns will ultimately be. And he'll build columns on top of that. Now we put in the cement in some of those areas with the rebar to make it even stronger, but also to create a load-bearing section from above. Josh with one of his grandsons as he's showing him a little bit of the retaining wall in one of those column supports, the steel cage. Now that he's got the retaining wall in place, he had to backfill with dirt, and this is between the house and the retaining wall. And you can see he's already got a dead man concrete piece there, two of them, between the wall and the house, and this is to prevent the retaining wall from spilling outward. That is tied in with rebar that was bent 90 degrees. A little bit of rebar and plastic getting ready for the cement to be delivered by a truck. And there it is, all done. We've got the patio in place, and you can see the rebar stubs sticking out. And we use those stubs later on when we create the additional concrete columns in a later video. So this is just walking around the house so you can see where the concrete house is today. We're going to be adding to this with additional projects here on the channel. So stay tuned as we continue to add to the house with various beams and flooring and so forth. For Odd Jobs Hijinks, I'm Brian, also known as Reckless, and for Josh, we hope you will subscribe, like the video, and provide comments on the techniques that Josh is using for his concrete house. Take care, everybody, and we hope to see you very, very soon in the next video.